After closely following several people living on cruise ships for some time and carefully analysing the different options and ways that they do it, I've discovered many remarkable things, like not only how they actually make it work and importantly what it really costs, but I also uncovered there's an unexpected dark side of living on cruise ships that you also need to know about. More on that later. Welcome aboard, I'm Gary Bembridge, and here's what I've discovered about living on ships. Before getting into the actual costs, I found there are 5 options to live full or part-time on cruise ships without actually being a crew member. Each comes with different costs and pros and cons. First, you could buy a cabin on a line with residential cruise ships, but you need plenty of money and must be sure that you want to make a long-term commitment to living at sea. Here are the lines that currently offer cabins you can buy. The World Residences at Sea ship, MSC The World, has been in service for 23 years, making it the longest operating residential ship. It's upmarket, and the 165 cabins range from $2.5 million studios to $15 million 3-bedroom suites, with annual fees between $113,000 and $1 million a year. Probably one of the best known currently is a recent entrant, Villa V Residences, which is currently on a 3-year around-the-world trip. The 32-year-old Villa V Odyssey was previously Fred Olsen's Braemar. It holds up to 650 guests. They offer full ownership, timeshare, or pay-as-you-go. You basically book different segments. Their cabins range from $130,000 inside cabins to buy with $48,000 a year fees, up to $440,000 suites with $132,000 a year in fees. Next, selling from late 2026, Crescent Seas was created by former Norwegian Cruise Group chairman Russell Galbert. It's a spin-off of his real estate business. In a strategic partnership with Regent Seven Seas, the first ship is a $50 million refurbishment of Regent Seven Seas Navigator into a 210 residential suite ship costing from $750,000 to $8 million. The plan is to add a further 4 residential ships. There are 2 residential lines with further out launches dates you need to know about too. Tory Lines, whose first ship is MS Narrative, it's much delayed and keeps pushing back launch dates. Their website now says it's 2028. It has 647 apartments ranging from $1.1 million inside cabins to $8 million 3-bedroom suites. From what I can see, there's at least $55,000 a year per person maintenance fee. There's another one which many people are skeptical about called Clyde Built. It's a Scottish startup who say they're going to build a luxury residential ship in Scotland called Dark Island, with 236 luxury suites from 1 to 3 bedrooms. It's not clear if they have funding and lists no prices for the cabins yet. As these, of course, are way out of most people's budget, what is the next option that may be a little bit more realistic and does not require that upfront long-term commitment? Of course, you can go on Cruise Line World or Grand Voyages, which lasts anything from 2 to 6 months, and then combine them to fill a year. Now, looking at examples to give you a sense of what it would cost you, the Cunard Queen Anne 170 night, that's 4-month world voyage next year, in an inside cabin for 2 would be around $300 a night, about $37,000, £18,700. This price is consistent across other lines, as the MSC Cruises 132 night world voyage next year is $340 a night. That's $45,000, about £34,700. So if you did 3 of these 4-month voyages to fill a year, that's about $135,000, £104,000 for the cruise, but that's before onboard costs like gratuities, drinks, and so on. That, of course, will add several thousands to that. The third option is by buying a part-time living on a cruise ship pass. Virgin Voyages are the only cruise line I'm aware of that offer these currently. They are pretty costly because instead of using an inside cabin, it's for a balcony cabin. So next year's pass costs $199,000, that's about £154,000, and means you can sail on any voyage, though, on any of the ships at any time of the year. A fourth, but not very easy to do, one is what a friend of mine does, enabling him and his partner to spend at least 10 months a year living on board cruise ships. He's an artist and runs art and craft classes on board ships. He's not paid for it, but gets a cabin, but must pay most of the other costs. This past year, he ran classes on a world cruise for 4 months. Then he was on a month-long artist in residence on another line, followed almost immediately by a 75-night South America grand voyage on yet another line, and so on. But that, of course, is an incredibly unusual and very hard way to find to live on ships. So what about something everybody can do, and something that costs less than the residential ships and by combining world voyages together option? I've closely followed and studied how 5 sets of people have been living at sea, and while there are many common things they do that you need to know about, they broadly fall into 2 approaches determined by a common but absolutely critical decision they all made before embarking on living on ships. Before they worked out how to live at sea, they asked this question: is my aim to simply live on a cruise ship at the lowest cost and where I go is less critical? Or is my aim to see as much of the world while living on a cruise ship as inexpensively as possible? So in the I want to live on a cruise ship with where it goes being less important camp, I followed and analysed the very well known and much reported in the cruising world Mario Salcedo, the Super Mario, who at the time of recording was soaring past his 1000th cruise on Royal Caribbean, which he's been living on for years. But even more interesting, I followed Kevin of the 30 and a Wake Up YouTube channel and Linnell of the From Poverty to Paradise YouTube channel, as they have done what Mario's doing, but for a third of his cost. More on how they do that to come up shortly. In the I want to live on a ship but see as much of the world as possible camp, I followed and analysed Rob and Ali of Grounded Life Cruises and Fraser of Fraser at Sea. Now I will get into the exact costs of these different approaches, but to understand how they achieve them, you absolutely need to know what they all do to get to the lowest possible costs. First, they cruised in inside cabins because they're the cheapest, costing as much as half as cruising in a balcony cabin. Now that comes with challenges that I will cover when I talk about the darker side of living on cruise ships. Also, they mostly booked using guaranteed fares, which means they did not choose the cabin. Again, coming with some issues like location, noise, and so on. All agreed to get the lowest cost, it's best to spend all or most of the time cruising in the Caribbean out of Florida. It is the busiest cruising region by some margin, so there's lots of competition, there's multiple departures, and it's much cheaper than every other region. Now, repositioning cruises are the other one all included, including to and from Europe as well as from Florida to Alaska. Now, these are longer cruises. They're usually much cheaper per day than other cruises. So, for example, Super Mario says 85% of his time is spent in the Caribbean and 15% on repositioning cruises. And that is how he keeps his annual costs within his budget. While both Kevin of 30 and a Wake Up and Robin Alley of Grounded Life Cruises say they use those repositioning cruises to keep annual costs low, but they also did it to add more variety to their cruising. Fraser at Sea, as he wanted to see more of the world, had the most variety. By cruising in Europe out of season in winter to get low prices there, he then used transatlantic to get to Florida and then to sail in the Caribbean for way less than European prices, which were now rocketing going into summer. Most stuck to one cruise line for their living at sea. One reason some did it was to build up loyalty, to unlock perks on that line which helped push down costs. For example, Super Mario only cruises on Royal Caribbean to get high status, which means he pays, for example, a much lower solar supplement, 150%, not 200%. He gets Wi-Fi to stay connected and work, and he receives daily drinks vouchers. However, there is a very different reason that Kevin of 30 and a Wake Up stuck to Princess and Anel of the From Poverty to Paradise sticks mostly to Carnival. Both do that as before starting on their living on ships, they went on a cruise on their line of choice and played on the slot machines in the casino to hit the threshold to start getting free inside cabin cruise offers. They did that because they saw they could dramatically cut the cost of living on cruise ships. Free casino cruises only require them to pay taxes and port fees. Linnell of Poverty to Paradise says she's booked 60 of these free cruises across the year, while Kevin filled his year with free casino offer cruises, but he went on longer cruises. Kevin said he found that once he started getting offers, he could book up to 3 cruises each time he got an offer, and they kept coming as long as he played a little bit on each cruise. Another big plus is with both Carnival and Princess offers, they both received onboard credit with every free booking that further offset onboard costs like gratuities. As an aside, if you want to consider using this approach, the cruise lines to focus on are Carnival, Norwegian, Princess and Royal Caribbean, and I have links to articles on my blog about how playing the casino works in the description of this episode. While Fraser at Sea did not stick to one line, he did try to use lines that offered status matching of loyalty where possible. Now, not many people do, with MSC Cruises matching even hotel and airline loyalty levels, and at times Virgin Voyages run loyalty matching programs. There was one thing that everyone did, even when sticking to one line, and that was to keep jumping and changing between ships. So why did they do this? All said that first, it was to get the best and lowest price in any week, as fares do vary based on demand on different ships at different times, but also, as I talk in more depth in the dark side of living on cruise ships, to added very much needed variety. All stressed the need to have a ruthless focus on keeping outgoings low, and how this requires a different mindset when cruising for fun on a vacation. While there are no escaping taxes, port taxes and gratuities, it means not having drinks packages, going on excursions, especially dining, and for many of them, not even buying Wi-Fi packages and relying on connecting when in ports or buying it ad hoc when they really needed it. Also, they stressed not forgetting when budgeting for the time living on ships, you need costs like, say, the mobile phone, toiletries, insurance, plus any costs that you cannot avoid at home. A good way to cut costs that it appears only Kevin from 30 and a Wake Up seemed to use was owning shares in the corporation who owns the line you're on. In his case, as it was Princess, that meant Carnival Corporation. By having 100 shares, he could get extra onboard credit for every cruise, which ran from $50 for cruises under 6 days to $250 for those over 14 days, which again helped cover things like gratuities or other onboard purchases like drinks. However, check the terms if going on casino comped cruises, because when I looked, it suggested for some lines that added onboard credit would not be given. I also noted that every single one of them had an income stream they could generate while on board to help fund their living. Interestingly, all but Mario, who says he works about 5 hours a day on an investment business, turned talking about their living on ships, the ship's cabins and ports, into their income stream. Kevin used his existing 30 and Wake Up channel, Rob and Ali their Grounded Life Cruises channel, and Fraser his Fraser at Sea channel, while Linnell actually created From Poverty to Paradise to create content about her living on ships. In fact, just as I made this, Linnell released a video saying that 9 months after starting the channel and her journey, her YouTube income was now covering her entire year's budget to live on ships, meaning she no longer needed to use her savings to fund it. But what did a year living on ships actually cost all of these people? Not everybody has been comfortable sharing exactly in detail how much they've spent across the year, but some of them have shared very detailed spreadsheets and cost trackers, and this is what they show. Super Mario regularly shares his costs, which average at the moment $275 a night as a solo traveler on Royal Caribbean in Inside Cabin. That's around $8,300 a month, about $100,000 a year. So while it's kind of close to the base fare of those world cruises I mentioned earlier, his costs are including things like gratuities, drinks and Wi-Fi that those world cruise fares did not. Now, as I mentioned, many of those are mostly covered by his loyalty program status. However, both Kevin from 30 and Wake Up and Linnell from Poverty to Paradise, who share very detailed costs from every month on board, are doing it for almost a third of that by getting those free cruises through casino offers. Both show they're out of pocket between $2,000 to $2,500 per month living on ships, so no more than about $30,000 a year. Of course, this approach is way more stressful and less certain than the approach Mario uses, which is more akin to what I think most of us would likely be looking at. From what I can calculate, everyone not using the casino route averaged at least $300 a night, but as you've seen, it takes a lot of work and effort. Living on cruise ships, I could also see from following everyone, is not always as exciting nor enjoyable as it appears looking from the outside or when we dream about it, or talk about a dark side, unexpected consequences, and challenges they had not expected. You can find out about them here in this video where I dive into them in detail. See you over there.